Reed, Silas, and I would be buds.
Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, our nerd love was strong. It's gone astray.
Hello, and welcome to the holochronologists. I'm Alyssa.
And I'm Ben.
And welcome back to our journey through the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, sorry, it's been a minute, folks.
It's been a little bit. It's a bit delayed. There was some moving. There's a cat.
We have a cat now.
Our schedule was a bit weird for a little bit, but now we are hopefully back on track.
I believe so.
With Into the Dark by Claudia Gray.
Claudia Gray. I have to say, I was very excited to do this book because I had listened to the audiobook of Claudia Gray's Master and Apprentice book, which should be coming up soon on the podcast. And it's excellent. I listened to it probably like 4 times at work in the past 2 months. This book definitely delivered. Just as good. Claudia Gray's awesome. Big fan. I know that she's written other Star Wars books as well, so I'm excited to get to those.
Awesome. So let's get started doing a timeline check. So like the other books we've seen from the High Republic so far, this one is taking place in 232 BBY, before Battle of Yavin. And this one is happening, again, concurrently, basically with the other books we've looked at. They're all happening around the same time in different parts of the universe. This one, we see some of Coruscant, we see some frontier and random space by nothing else.
Yeah, we get some cool lore here.
And then it also has flashbacks to 25 years earlier. So this is the earliest bit of the Star Wars universe we have,
Experienced.
So I guess that would be 17? 217?
No, because you add, right?
Oh,
because we're further away.
That's true.
So
259.
BBY.
BBY.
Yeah.
Media review. So this will be our review of the book Sans spoilers.
Sans spoilers. No
Don't
spoilers.
worry if you haven't read the book and are planning to. You can hear what we think about it first.
Yeah, this is the part where I just get to talk about how great Claudia Gray is. She's great. This book was awesome. It was cool. We get to see Jedi face off against threats that aren't the Nihil. But, I mean, we see Nihil, but we also see not Nihil, and also not, Sith, like we do in the feature films. You get to see some cool stuff. New villains that present interesting challenges to Jedi, as well as, cool Force lore and cool, fringe space adventure stuff, as well as cool characters that aren't Jedi. I'm a big fan of cool characters that aren't Jedi.
Me too. Yeah, I really like this book. It had a lot of different, things going on, some twists, which keeps you on your toes, and it's also interesting to just hear from a couple different perspectives within the Jedi and outside of the Jedi, kind of on what the Jedi are and what the idea of the Republic is, which is really interesting. I think it was a great look at that from a couple different perspectives of people living inside of it.
And speaking of different perspectives, something that's really cool about the High Republic series thus far is that a lot of what we are getting in these books, and we've only really touched books so far, just different kind of degrees of novel, all basically different perspectives on the same event at this point. We're just seeing the different viewpoints of the mass casualty event in the Hetzel system.
Yeah, because everything that's happened either is that happening in the books or is something that is the result of that. So you have people shipwrecked in different parts of the galaxy. You have people
experiencing other emergence fallouts.
Yeah. So it is kind of all tied around this one event and seeing the waves of its impact across the galaxy and, in the Outer Rim, as well as bits about it on Coruscant itself and in those core world places, which is really cool.
So that being said, if this is your first time listening to us, definitely check out
Light of the Jedi.
Yeah, read Light of the Jedi before any other High Republic stuff, because that's going to give you the context for everything else.
And I keep reading these other books, a character will be named, and I'm like, oh wait, I think we heard them in this book, and it's very interesting to kind of make the connections.
And this book hits off with that pretty quick.
Okay, going into spoiler territory.
This is serif spoilers.
That's what we called it. You've made that joke before.
With spoilers? I love font jokes. They're real good.
So, yeah, it starts off real strong in the feels. If you've read
Light of the Jedi.
So this is going to have spoilers for Light of the Jedi. as well as Into the Dark.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we can blanket statement say that when we get into these with spoilers things, because of the way that this podcast is structured, and we're going to be making comparisons to the other media that we
Anything
review,
that's come before it is
this is
fair
going to be
game.
spoilers for basically anything that we've talked about on the podcast.
So we start off in the fields, if you've read Light of the Jedi, because you start off with Jorah Molly.
And her apprentice, who's the main character of this book.
But if you've read Light of the Jedi, you know that she dies in battle with the Nihil. So you're instantly like, oh no, you're gonna die.
So it starts off, we meet the main character, Reith Silas, who is Jorah Molly's apprentice. And they're in a high-speed chase on Coruscant, chasing some pirates, I believe, in a speeder bike chase. Because they talk about how Coruscant is in this kind of process of ever expansion and growth, and so there's just a bunch of opportunity for like thieves as well as there are any other occupation. So the Jedi are hunting down these pirates that just made like a big heist, and Reith Silas it demonstrates that Reith Silas is really, he's not like exceptionally gifted in the Force, but he tries very hard, and so he ends up doing things before Jedi who would be more gifted are, because he tries harder, and he doesn't have like a free pass, I guess, at Force usage. So he works harder, and it actually makes him better. And Jorah talks about this when it's demonstrated that he kind of instinctively reads her mind, but it's not instinctively. He's going out of his way to do it because he feels that he has to always be, better and always strive to be better, because he knows that he isn't inherently the best.
And I think it's one of those things where a lot of the Jedi will have something that they're inherently very good at, whether it be like sensing emotions or, I don't know,
like Emery from Test of Courage.
Or Buryaga.
Yep.
That are very emotion sensitive. He is strong in the Force, but isn't necessarily strong in a specific area, and is one, like, I guess you could say a run-of-the-mill Jedi, like, not a prodigy.
Not for Nestra.
Not for Nestra, but he is dedicated, and boy, does he love some research.
Yeah.
Literally, at one point, it says that there's, like, a carol in the archives that pretty much all of the Jedi that frequent
They're,
it...
like, unspokenly
just,
set
like,
aside for him.
It's, like, that's his carol. And I'm sure there's other ones, like, for other Jedi, too. But, like, that's how much he spends so much time in the archives studying to kind of understand these techniques and get this really deep understanding, which I really appreciate. I think I love the Jedi archives and the Jedi that frequent it.
I'm always a big fan of getting characters that are like twists on what we expect, or are like a new take on a character, and we haven't had like the research Jedi yet. I guess we sort of did with Jocasta Nu, but she was more of like a librarian educator, and this character is more of the like just craving knowledge. And it's just really cool to see this like character who's studying, and when he makes a mistake, his first instinct is, I will go and learn about it so that I don't make that mistake again, which we see in this car chase. He like grapples onto this other ship, which has like a more powerful engine than their ship, so they start getting like tugged along by it. Jorah Molly like talks to him about that, and he's like, yep, I've already noted that was my biggest mistake, and I've already like put together a list of engine specs that I should look into for the most popular like speeders on the market, so that in the future I won't make that mistake again, which is cool.
Yeah. And I think he definitely thinks ahead of that. He likes it on Coruscant. He likes being in the temple, being in the archives. But, as we know from Light of the Jedi, Jorah Molly has decided to resign from the council and take up the position at the Starlight Beacon on that outpost for the Jedi, which Reith isn't too keen on.
Oh, he's so sad.
He doesn't want to leave. He has Padawan friends. He likes being in the archives. He likes studying. He doesn't want to have adventures like Honesty in Test of Courage. Like, he doesn't want to he's fine reading books and getting his knowledge that way. He feels
like he knows his path, and he doesn't want to stray from that. And Jorah Molly understands that he believes that he has seen his path, but part of his training is he has to kind of, like, learn about other ways and just kind of, like, broaden his horizons a bit. Mm-hmm. and she knows that this will be really good for him.
And so one of the kind of thought puzzles she gives him as well before they kind of separate.
Because she's going to go to the Starlight Beacon first to kind of like go and get set up there, and then he's going to come later.
So before they separate, she gives him the question, why can no Jedi cross the Kyber Arch alone? So the Kyber Arch is basically, it's this arch that's built up as a memorial and like a monument sort of to fallen Jedi and Jedi that have, died fighting for good or bringing peace to the world. It's
literally built out of the Kyber crystals from fallen Jedi lightsabers, which is super cool.
And so it's described as kind of not in its like actual physical presence, but in the meditative practice of it. It's kind of like a labyrinth where it's not hard to walk through a labyrinth, but the act of doing it is meditative and calming. It's same with the Kyber Arch. Like, it's a meditative practice. You can do it, and Jedi do it alone all the time, as Reith points out, and he does it himself while trying to like question that. So that's something that he's kind of sitting with throughout this entire book, and it keeps coming up because Jorah kind of left him with that piece to think on, and then they never got to reconnect, and so it was something that kind of sat with him. And it's interesting to see his thought process. He keeps coming back to it throughout the book. But we can start getting to talk about his journey towards the Starlight Beacon. So he is going to be on a transport with some other Jedi,
yep.
Which he was excited to find out when he went to the transport. There was Des Reardon, who was Jorah Mali's previous apprentice. So they've, spent a little bit of time together. They've done duels. Des is looked up to by, like, all the Padawan. People love him.
It gave Reith Silas, like, style points because he knew Des Reardon.
Yeah, and would duel with him.
Yeah, they got to spar, and so he was like the coolest Padawan in his year because everybody wanted to be able to duel with Des.
Yeah. And then there was also Comac, who is a master, and he's I love it so much. He's a folklorist. Yes, we've got a historian, we've got a folklorist on this crew. I am living for this. So he goes out into the galaxy to collect stories from all the various planets, different cultures, things like that, and kind of and provides them for the Jedi archive. So he's out there getting these real life stories. So obviously heading out to the frontier for him is a great experience and really part of his journey. And so he's excited to go. And then we have one final Jedi,
Orla Jareni,
who has recently become a way seeker, which
is so cool.
That a way seeker is when you decide to...
You get the Jedi Council's permission to, like, temporarily not be a Jedi while also still being a Jedi.
Yeah, so basically you aren't under...
the Council's authority, right?
Yeah, so you don't have to listen to the Council's commands of, like, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. You are choosing your own way, hence the way seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of being able to follow the Force and try to learn more from it as well. So that's what she's doing, and she's feeling drawn to head out into the Outer Rim and explore Force out there. And her big thing really is that we see throughout this book in the flashbacks and in the main part is her questioning, do I do what the Force is telling me to do and instinctually I feel like I should do? Or do I do what I've been trained to be the first thought or the first maneuver I should be doing? So do you listen to your instincts and listen to the Force, or do you listen to the Council and the trainings? That's kind of Orla's thing throughout this whole book. That's what she's thinking over and, debating in herself. Comac, his thing that he's dealing with is basically just death and grieving. And
when he and Orla meet up at the landing pad, he says something about like having to go back to the beginning because Starlight Beacon is located in the system where he and Orla went on a mission together like 25 years ago, and he experienced great loss there. And so he's talking about how he has to go back and kind of face the past in order to move on with his future.
So a lot of what Comac deals with throughout this book is the feelings of grief, and he's also questioning the Jedi way in that it's considered when a Jedi dies, like, you don't grieve them, they've become one with the Force, you're a Jedi, you shouldn't be giving into those emotions. He is questioning throughout that whole thing, like, should that be what we're doing? Like, that's not the right way to be dealing with our emotions. Obviously, because 25 years later, he's still deeply traumatized by the loss of his master, and it's not helped by more recent deaths. All of the Jedi in this book really have some aspect, I think, of the Jedi Order that they're struggling with and trying to come to terms with or think on, and really they're questioning the overall authority of the Jedi Council. Are they the be-all, end-all or not when it comes to being a Jedi?
Which is something that Claudia Gray does really well.
And then, as well, we have the crew of the
vessel
substitute transport. The ship's name is the Vessel, and it's part of the Bind Guild, which is transport guild
based in the Outer Rim.
Yeah, based in the Outer Rim. So they're starting to do core world stuff. So this is the first trip core world of this crew, which is captained by Leox Gyasi. Leox Gyasi, that's how we're going to say that. It is also crewed by Affy.
She's basically Scover Bind, the leader of the Bind Guild's, like, essentially adopted daughter.
Mm-hmm. So Affy, her parents were part of the Bind Guild, and they died on a mission, and Scover kind of
adopted her, and has been kind of grooming her to take over for her when she retires.
Yeah.
So she essentially is the heir of the Bind Guild.
Correct. Their third and final crew member, Geode. Who is my favorite.
He's a rock.
This sentient creature, that's one of the things in this book, too. Throughout this, in the beginning parts, you're, like, made to be like, okay, so Affy and Leox are, like, just joking, like, this is an actual rock, and you're like, but is it? And then later you're like, no, this is a sentient being that somehow gets around.
I went through this entire book being like, I do not know if Geode is a living, breathing organism, or if Geode is just a rock that, like, lucky things happen around. Like, Geode is great.
There are things that happen with Geode, though, that, like, it can't be...
Geode had to have influence on it in some way, but it's just astounding. Geode is really funny.
It has to be something that is able to self-propel in some way.
And interact with spaceships.
It interacts with spaceships.
Because Geode is their navigator.
Yeah, and, like, does things. So, like, but you could also be like, well, maybe they just have, like, the computer system do it. But, like, it's definitely a sentient being, right?
It has to be.
Because later on in the book, no one else is on the ship. And Geode is supposed to be, like, watching the ship to make sure everything's fine on the ship. And then...
And he does shoot, like, a laser, right?
I think so. And then he also leaves the ship and is able to literally save somebody else. And just, like, there was no one else around. So Geode is definitely... It's a sentient thing.
Sentient teleporting rock.
I think it just rolls. I don't know. No, because there was something about it getting through the, like, passageway. Because one time they're, like, stuffed so, like, closely, Geode almost wasn't able to, like, get through the passageways. So, like, it moves on its own.
It's also fairly sizable, right? It's like 3 feet tall or something.
Yeah. It's like a boulder rock. So they take off from Coruscant.
Yep.
But then...
And we get a cool moment where Affy asks Reith about what are Jedi, because she was like, I was told that you're just a bunch of monks, but you guys are dressed like normal people. What does that mean? And Reith explains what Jedi mean to him, essentially, which is really cool, which is basically like, you know, I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's basically like, we seek to connect with the Force in a way that, like, brings peace to others. Something along those lines, right?
So they take off from Coruscant.
Yep. And Reith has that cool moment where he explains what Jedi are and what they mean to him and to the galaxy as a whole, to someone who hasn't really heard about Jedi, which he thinks is a great opportunity to talk about the Jedi and to kind of spread the the knowledge about what the Order is, and he thinks that that's really cool that he gets to experience people who don't know what Jedi are and talk to them about what it means. And then, while they're in hyperspace...
It looks weird.
It looks red.
That's literally the thing. They're like, hyperspace does not look normal.
It looks broken.
And so they're trying to find a way out of hyperspace, and so Geode sends, just a preset of coordinates that happen to be in the ship's Navi computer, and they pop out.
Basically looking for the quickest exit.
Yeah, so they pop out of hyperspace into basically just the middle of... Nowhere. There's nothing else around except other ships that were also just trying to get out of hyperspace. There is a big star, which, if it's solar flaring that much, is probably a pretty old star.
Yeah. But before we get to that, the reason hyperspace was looking weird was because the Legacy run had just exploded in hyperspace, and they were seeing the aftermath of that, which, if you've read, Light of the Jedi caused the mass casualty event in the Hetzel system. So now they're in the middle of nowhere. They see a space station. They see this star that keeps having really dangerous solar flares, and they see a bunch of other ships in the system, and they communicate to them, hey, if we all dock on the far side of this space station, our ships will be safe from the solar flares, and we can kind of all board the space station, get our bearings, decide what we have to do from there, pool our resources to survive for however long we have to. And so they do.
Bringing a bunch of disparate groups together, ones that a lot of them just...
don't get along.
They just want what's best for themselves, so
That's
they all
true.
want to basically plunder this entire space station and are just trying to get as much as they possibly can, and then fighting other groups. Yep. And then we
meet this little girl named Nan.
And her old guardian.
Who's a Zabrak named Haig.
Affy's like, well, I guess the Jedi will figure it out.
Yeah.
Because, she's from the Outer Rim, so she knows this. And she's like, well, I guess it's a lesson time for the Jedi. They think they know all this stuff, but they don't know that these groups are not going to go well together.
Well, there was some violence going on.
None of them really understood what a Jedi was. So, Reath was trying to stop Nan from basically getting kidnapped.
That's what it was.
And Reath was trying to stop them, and they're like, oh, you can't do anything, you're all so small. And, he takes out his lightsaber, and
cuts
they're
off
like...
the guy's arm.
But before that, they're like, oh, you can't do anything with, what is that little thing? And then he cuts off a person's arm, because he's like, what's the minimal damage? I'm gonna cut off the arm, because there's better arm prosthetics than leg prosthetics.
Yeah, I love that he does that calculation. He's like, I can take your arm, or I can take your leg. Taking your arm will be less detrimental to you, so I'm gonna take your arm.
Yeah, and just to basically show them, nah, this is a lightsaber that can do a lot of damage. And so he does it, and they're all like, oh. Because again, these people in the Outer Rim, they've never met a Jedi. I mean, most people haven't met a Jedi, but they don't know as much about the Jedi as people in core worlds would know.
They don't have any sort of mythos around the Jedi that the people in the core worlds do. Oh, so they're exploring this space station once they kind of calm everybody down, and they're seeing, vines everywhere, plants everywhere, and these droids that their only job is to keep these vines nice and clean and go through and de-weed everything and protect the plants essentially. And if you do anything bad against the plants, they come at you.
Oh yeah.
Which they find out when they're crawling down a maintenance shaft.
They're going down tunnels because the station is made out of rings basically. There's a center sphere thing, and there's rings. I don't know. I'm not a very visual person, so I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to look like. I even looked up a picture, and I still don't really understand it. But the point is that this is also a design that's very, very old, and it's by a culture that basically just died out.
But was known for, being hyper-aggressive and, attacking civilizations and, wiping them out, right?
And then I think it became they spread themselves just, so
too thin and just kind of
that
disappeared.
They got wiped out themselves. So it's this old technology that no one's used to. It's different. So they're climbing through some of these tunnels to try to see what else is on the station, and they break some of the vines, and the droids, which are 8 Ts. That's very hard to say with my no T accent. 8 Ts attack them with pruning shears because they're unhappy that they broke.
They broke a branch, right?
Yeah, just a part of a vine. So they end up having to basically put a plant they like tie plants to each of them because then the
ATs
won't
attack them because then they would be endangering the plants themselves.
Yeah, it's a fun loop around.
They logic break the droids. It's pretty funny. And they use this to get to like a secret maintenance hatch, and then they find this, I forget what they find. It's like a room, right? Or they find like a series of rooms, and then Des goes through one, and the door closes immediately. You hear like Des scream, and then he's gone.
And Reef has gotten like a sunburn basically on like from a slit that was in the door.
Yeah, just blinding light.
And then he opens the door and Des is gone. He could see the helix rings, and you know, they're force sensitive. He can no longer
sense Des, so he believes that Des either got jetted into space or disintegrated.
But considering they can't sense Des, they assume he is gone because none of the Jedi can sense him anywhere. And that usually means that the Jedi is dead. So again, this triggers Comac because he still has this unresolved emotion and grief towards the loss of his master and not being able to have dealt with those emotions in a healthy way. As we know as humans, I hope. Burying your feelings doesn't help in the long run. It leaves traumatic responses to occur later on in life. So Comac is obviously very shaken by this because he's back in the same area where he originally lost his master.
Which we are finding out in these flashbacks.
Yeah. And now he's lost Des.
And in addition, while Des and Reef Silas were down there exploring, Orla and Comac were kind of exploring this like garden that has these statues that are like resonating dark side. And so on top of all of this, he's also dealing with the fact that there's something evil here, and he believes that the statues themselves are emitting dark side energy, which is what's causing the space station to kind of be off. And so he believes they have to take these to the Jedi Temple
to be cleansed.
Once they get the kind of like A-OK, hyperspace is fine.
Yeah, they're going to bring them back to the temple to cleanse them because it has to be done by more than just the two of them. So they are like, okay, that's what we gotta do. But then that's when fighting breaks out, and then, more and more chaos, as all situations lead to. They start to hear from other bits of the Outer Rim and kind of start to hear what's going on, and that hyperspace is just closed, there's no way out, and they're trying to get all of the disparate groups to work together, share resources to make sure no one goes without food, that people have repair.
There was like a luxury
supplies.
Like cruise ship that was there, and they were like, no, we can't share food. All of our passengers paid for high class meals, so all of our resources have to go to giving them that. And the Jedi are like, come on, man, you've got so much food here. It doesn't stop making fancy meals and just divvy it up into some rations, and then everybody can eat.
They are able to organize that, thankfully. And eventually, hyperspace starts to open back up.
They can head on out.
Ships are able to start leaving, so everyone starts departing from the space station. Nan and her guardian are going to... Haig are going to stay and do some repairs. The Jedi and the vessel crew are going to head back to Coruscant because...
Taking these statues.
Because they have to take the statues, and they're not able to head to the Starlight Beacon, so they're just going to go back to Coruscant. Reith is ecstatic that they get to go back to Coruscant. They're very sad that Des isn't coming with them, but, they head on back. Reith is very happy with that, even though he's gone through a lot.
And he's about to go through more, because when they get back to Coruscant, he finds out that his master was killed in the battle with the Nihil.
He has a lot of emotions with that, and...
This is the point where he goes back to the Kyber Arch and passes over it, but still can't figure out what the riddle was.
Because he literally did it alone. So obviously you can do it alone. So the question to him still doesn't make sense. Why can no Jedi cross the Kyber Arch alone? It doesn't make sense. And he's expecting to be summoned basically to get a new master because he's like, oh, that's what has to happen. I have to do what the Order want me to do. But they are actually tell him...
Take all the time you need, and we also want your input as to who you might want to be your master or your next assignment, which is really troubling for him because he wants to stay on Coruscant, but at the same time he knows that Jorah Mali's like kind of last wish for him was to take him out to the, fringes so that he can learn to kind of like be a little bit more of an adventurer Jedi, so that he can kind of get both sides of what it's like to be a Jedi.
At the same time, he's also not sure if he wants to continue with he a bit questions, do I continue with the Jedi or do I just give it up? Instead of getting called to get a master, he's called to just hear about the Nihil. And because he was out in the Outer Rim, he was kind of included in this group meeting of Jedi and things to hear about this new threat and to see if anybody knew anything, saw anything while they were out there. And Reith was very prepared to just sit there very quietly at the back of the room because he's like, I'm a Padawan. What would I know? I'm in a room full of knights and masters. But in looking at some of the images, he sees familiar-looking things, such as Nan and Haig's ship, which was very piecemeal. The second it described it in the book, I was like, oh, it's a Nihil ship. And then it was like, oh, it's just an innocent girl and a guardian. And I was like, okay. But I was like, but that sounds like a Nihil ship. But I guess if they're poor and they put it together, whatever. And then I pushed it from my mind. Reith was like, interesting.
And Nihil kind of have the aesthetic of, like, I think, like, the Reavers from Firefly, because it's literally just, like, putting stuff together so that it will keep flying, and it doesn't matter if it's safe, it just matters that it works. Yeah, and so he's like, so Reith is then kind of at the point where he's like, I may have met some Nihil when I was out on this space station.
And I may have accidentally told
Helped
them
them?
a lot of things about what the Republic does and the Jedi.
Oh yeah, because after he saved Nan, Nan was like, so what do Jedi do? And he was like, oh, another person I can talk to Jedi
and like
about.
also just things about the Republic in general. And he was, of course, more than happy to answer questions because A, he likes to explain things. B, he saw it as an opportunity that would be very good because it's showing people in the Outer Rim, like, what the Republic's about and what the Jedi are about. So he was like, oh, this is great. And so he was like, ooh, so I told her, like, all this stuff. And was, like, very afraid that he was gonna just be...
in trouble.
But of course, the Jedi were like,
how would you know?
You didn't know. You were doing your job trying to be...
You did the Jedi thing, man. We can't fault you for that.
Yeah. So again, he's not in trouble, but he's like...
He's like, maybe I should be.
But he also is like, they're still there. Last he knew, they were hanging around a bit longer on the space station.
So now he's thinking, oh my god, we just handed them a new base for the Nihil, too. So we have to go back there. Meanwhile, Orla and Comac were talking with Jedi about the evil... dark side statue.
Trying to cleanse them down in a inner chamber within the temple that's like really far down because the temple was built on a place that used to be Sith controlled. And so they're in this like old Sith temple within the Jedi temple where there's a bunch of old artifacts that have been found that are Sith artifacts, and they bring them there to cleanse them because it's a, what's it called? A convergence?
Yeah, but while they're doing this cleansing ritual, the other Jedi are like, yo, there's nothing to be cleansed. There never was. There's nothing evil in these things.
Which means Orla and Comac then think, if there's no...
If the darkness wasn't in these things...
It means they were acting as something to hold back darkness, the darkness of the dark side that was already in place. And they're like, whew, that's not good. Because if we took them,
they
that
essentially took the, like, bars off of the prison that was that space station.
Yeah. So they both also decide...
We have to go back to the space station
we need to
take these things
bring these back. And they approach Reith about it.
And Reith's like, yeah, I do want to go back, but the council doesn't want us to. And they're kind of like, well, the council didn't explicitly say that we can't do it.
And Comac's like, I'm not on an assignment. You're not on an assignment.
Orla doesn't have to answer to the Jedi.
Orla's a way seeker. That can just be the way.
Yeah, we can just do what we want, sort of.
So basically, really cool. Their way of looking at it was, we're just not going to say that's what we're doing. Comac was put in charge of removing these artifacts, basically. And so he's like,
they didn't tell me where I had to remove them to.
The best place to remove them to, would be where they came from. They decide that they're all three going to head back to the station and go to try to find a transport.
The vessel hasn't left yet.
The vessel hasn't left yet, and they didn't know this, but the vessel was already planning to go back.
Because we have a side plot involving Affy, because while Affy was on the space station, she was digging around on her own just for her own kind of like, I wonder why we got sent here. I wonder why the coordinates for this place were in my ship. And she starts finding like, almost like, I equate it to like thieves' cant in like Dungeons and Dragons rogue kind of stuff, where she sees like smugglers' sketches like that are talking about like, kind of like directions of like, you'll find a fork in hyperspace going in this direction.
She thinks she's trying to decode it.
Yeah, she's not fluent. She's just kind of decoding it based on what the picture is, and then she sees a symbol that is like the name of their ship.
Of her parents'
ship. And so she's like, I should talk to Scover Buying about this place, figure out why it was in our ship's like automatic navigation coordinates, and if my parents had to come here, why that is. And so that's why she and the rest of the crew of the vessel were planning on going back there to dig up more evidence before she approached Scover. So when the Jedi approach her and are like, hey, we kind of want to go back there, she's like, yeah, by all means, that's fine. And so they all band together and hop back over to the space station. And when they get there,
they show up at the station.
They see the Nihil.
There's a bunch of Nihil.
Right.
So now there's like a Nihil warship and some bigger and some other ships that, Nan has paged to come out to there. Basically, what they do is all the Nihil aren't able to dock because it's a weird docking sitch or whatever.
Because it's like an outdated system.
The Nihil haven't docked, so they're orbiting the station. So Leox just goes on the opposite side of the orbit and then goes into the same like orbital speed as the Nihil. So they're just constantly on opposite sides.
It's like in a cartoon when they're walking around a tree to hide from somebody.
They realize they can't dock, so they just jump out of into the docking bay, because as we've seen before, Jedi can survive for brief periods of time in the vacuum of space. Mm-hmm. And then they have to also then get the statues across as well, but they are successful.
Yep. Orla and Comac go to reestablish the statues, and Reeth
went to power up the shields because there was a big solar flare coming.
And so to defend the ship, he went down the same shaft that they went down earlier when they lost Dez, and he ends up in the same room that Dez was in.
Well, a similar room.
And finds out that it wasn't a vaporization chamber, but rather a like hyperspace launch pod. Again, like they're on this kind of outdated space station. The way that these space stations would like transport people is by putting them into like pods and then launching the pod through hyperspace at like a certain velocity that it would then leave hyperspace at a certain point and just drop where it was supposed to onto kind of like a receiving end.
He realizes this because he realizes he's in hyperspace. And when he pops out, has landed on a planet, and he gets out, and lots of stuff where, the technology's overgrown, but it's still there. It looks like it could maybe still work. He sees another pod, which is promising. And then he sees creatures moving, and they're big, viney tree things.
And they speak to him with such comforting words as, meat. Meat has come.
They want to eat him. And then they realize that he's similar to one that has already come. And so they decide to be able to learn more about them and their metal light sticks.
They want him to fight.
They want him to fight each other. Because, Dez is there. But he's been
through
a lot. Hit his head real bad, bled a lot.
We find out that the Drengir can kind of they have poison barbs that they can inject people with.
So they were just drugging him.
And so they were drugging him to be super tripped out and super weak. And then the Drengir are like, hey, just kill this guy that showed up and we'll set you free. And he's like, I don't want to kill anyone. I'm a Jedi. And then they just pump him with so much adrenaline that he can only think freedom and kill. So then they point him at Wreath and they're like, hey, go kill that guy and you'll be free. And Wreath's like, oh my god, it's Dez. Hey, Dez. And then Dez comes at him with a lightsaber.
Wreath, realizing that even though Dez is drugged up, he's still Dez Reardon and very good at dueling and lightsaber battles. So Wreath decides to go a different method, basically just trying to hold Dez off and trying to connect with him emotionally, both through the Force and through his words, because he's feeling very cut off from the Force as is in this place. Because, again, the Drengir are kind of giving off this dark side of the Force energy, and so it's kind of blocking his. So he's basically just trying to talk to Dez, and, you know, he tells Dez that Jorah's gone.
And yeah, he uses Jorah Mali's passing as a way to like signal boost their connection through Jorah.
And trying to, you know, get Dez
to realize who he is.
To focus, basically, since he couldn't use the Force to convey emotions to Dez, or get Dez to like feel his own emotions, he decides that he's just going to try to use his words and their connection, their connection to their feelings about Jorah, to basically get Dez to feel his own emotions so that he can tap back into himself and not just the drug-addledness that the Drengir have put him into.
And he basically achieves enough of kind of like a halter in Dez that he's able to just kind of like disarm him.
Mm-hmm. And then Wreath basically turns on the Drengir and is like, I have 2 of these. Mm-hmm. And is like,
I'm leaving with my friend.
But the problem is, the Drengir want the hyperpods to work again. They don't know how to do it.
Right.
And so
it wasn't their technology to begin with.
Yeah.
It was the technology of that like ancient...
Amminaxin.
Yes.
I don't know how to say it. So Wreath is able to get themselves into a pod, but the problem is...
That's exactly what the Drengir want.
If he goes, that means the Drengir will know how to do it and send their own pod, because there's 2 pods. But he decides he's got to go for it and hope for the best once they get to the station.
Meanwhile...
Little does he know, there's already Drengir on the station.
There's already Drengir on the station, and they're awake. So we find out that what these statues were doing were basically keeping the Drengir asleep, and that those statues were put there by ancient Sith, because the Sith were having issues fighting the Drengir. And so the Sith established these stones these statues to put the Drengir to sleep permanently, because it was the only way that they could stop them. Because the Drengir start fighting Orla and Comac, and they're like regenerating from the lightsaber blows, because they're like tree matter that they just kind of like can regrow super quickly.
Yeah, they're plants. They can just grow back a vine. Mm-hmm. That's been cut off. Fighting
them while they're trying to reactivate the stones. And what they find out is that the ATs don't register the Drengir as plants.
So or at least plants not under the AT's care.
Yeah, so that if they can get the Drengir to attack the plants, they can swarm them with ATs, which will distract them long enough to set up the like warding stones. And so they drop like a chandelier kind of thing that's full of plants down onto the Drengir, which the ATs believe the Drengir pulled down. They start swarming the Drengir, distracting them, and while they're doing that, the Jedi are able to reactivate the warding stones. And now back to Reath Silas.
What about back to Affy and the Nihil?
Oh, we can go back to Affy and the Nihil if you want.
That's also going on, because don't forget, the Nihil are on this station as well. Well, Nan and Hagar and the other ones are kind of around, but then they decide to start boarding. So Affy tries to blow up the part where the ship is docked, which does some damage to the Nihil, but just a lot of damage to the station itself. And the Nihil are still, coming on, because there's a lot of them. Soon enough, we end up with trying to fight the Nihil, and the Jedi are fairly successful for a bit. They get the Nihil to at least fall back and have to re-strategize, but they know that there's always more Nihil that could be coming. Then Wreath shows up.
Yeah.
With Dez.
So Wreath and Dez show up, and Wreath is like, what if I just use the Force to shoot their pod, like, all the way to the end of the docking tunnel?
Not even all the way. Just a little bit.
Oh, so that it can't, like, form,
so that it can't dock.
Can't form a vacuum seal, and therefore so
basically,
yeah,
it comes and it docks. Wreath just like pushes it back. Like, in my head, it's like a foot. I don't know if
I
it's
think it was more than a foot.
It was probably like a bit more than a foot. But basically, so that when the Drengir open their pod door, they step out not into the, like, safety of, like, the tunnel room, but into the chamber with the helix ring, which is just gonna
shoot them back,
fire at them. Yep. And so just destroys it like that.
And then they go and rejoin the others, who are super relieved to find out that Des is alive.
However, they're like, hey, we got some Nihil, but we'll put the statues back. But they decide Des needs to get back to the vessel, which is difficult to do because of Affy's
explosion.
Leox is trying to get in because he wants to save Affy because he cares about her a lot, kind of like a father figure.
Yeah.
Then they're trying to get Des onto the ship. So Comac's basically like, okay, I'm going to try to get Des through, get him medical attention, and, like, take care of him and get him set in the ship. That leaves Orla and Wreath to try to figure out how to fight back against the Nihil. And Wreath has a great idea. Because when you have not one, but two different enemies that would likely, just they want to cause damage to anything that's not them.
Right.
What's one way to deal with that?
The enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Yep. Wreath's plan is to just have the Nihil and the Drengir just battle each other for a bit so that they can just get off this station because it's way too dangerous. They can't fight off the Nihil. They don't want the Nihil to control this station because it would enable them to, like, use the hyperspace pod launcher
to get even more kind of secretly everywhere than they already can.
Because while you can't send, like, a whole, like, troop of people, you can get spies on the inside to, like, recon and head back. They're trying to figure out what they can do, but then it's just a matter of we need to save our own butts and get out of here. Wreath and Orla, deactivate the shield that was just put back up, which means it's super hard to break. Unlike the first time when it was it'd been set up forever ago, there's already, a little worn out, so it was easier for them to take down that binding. But this time, it was just like an energy zapper. It threw them backwards, like releasing that, like, it's like a static shock of, like, dark side back. You have plant people fighting
pirates,
space pirate chaos people.
Mad Max pirates.
And that is nothing if not exciting.
Absolutely.
Because sure enough, just as they get the Drengir out, they start chasing them, but they're very slow because they have just had this whole force shock and everything. And they're very concerned because the Drengir are catching up to them. But then they realize the Drengir are just running past them. Wreath was right, and the Drengir are willing to take on the Nihil because the Nihil came in shooting and shot some of the Drengirs. Wreath and Orla and Affy and Leox are able to head back towards the vessel because the Drengir and the Nihil are all distracted with themselves and fighting each other. Wreath, though, doesn't quite want to get on the ship because, like I said, like, if you let the Nihil have this power of this station, it's going to be so bad. Like, it's just not good. It's not good at all. And it's also not good for the Drengir to have it. But they're now both on this ship, and no matter what, somebody's going to survive that. But Wreath has a solution. He decides that one way to do this, it's time for a bit of a trick here. So he has gotten to know some of the systems pretty well. So he decides to drop the airlock, open it to the vacuum of space. So it begins to suck out the Drengir and the Nihil. He's holding on to a ladder, hoping for the best, and hoping that once they were sucked out, he would be able to close it. Because like we said before, the Jedi have been trained to be able to survive in some of the deep space, or the vacuum of space. So he let his whole breath out. He's waiting, but his loose grip is starting to get the better of him. The ladder is not functioning so great anymore as a ladder. Then comes our good old friend that is definitely a sentient creature. Geode had left the ship and was basically there to catch
Wreath.
So I guess Geo also like is magnetically stuck to the ship. I don't know what it is. It must have to be something with how he gets around too.
Nobody knows how Geode works except Geode.
Wreath kind of slams into Geode, causing some injuries to himself. Still
He's
alive. And is able to, reclose the air shields and get back. They all get back onto the ship. And so he's taken out most of the Nihil, took out the Drengir that were there, and they head back to Coruscant once again.
And then, so the day is kind of saved, and then we kind of reach the kind of epilogue of the story, essentially, where Reeth realizes what Jorah meant by a Jedi cannot cross the Kyber Arch alone, because the Kyber Arch is made up of the Jedi that have come before and fallen and, fought for the Order. The Arch wouldn't exist without other Jedi, and therefore you cannot cross it alone.
So it's the idea that no Jedi is alone. There's Jedi that have come before you.
Jedi that will come after you.
You are no one sole person in the galaxy.
And then he approaches the Jedi Masters and, says that he wants to continue to be a Jedi and that he has an idea of who he wants to be his master. And he goes to talk to Comac. Comac was
unsure of himself and he admits to Reeth that he was kind of like on the fence about staying with the Jedi Order.
Yep.
Because he's questioning a lot of things and like trying to figure out how to question it. But as he talks to Reeth, he kind of decides that the best way to learn and think,
learn to continue to be a Jedi and to kind of expand what he believes a Jedi is to be is to take on an apprentice. And he has a really great line about how, like, by being his apprentice, he will be the greatest teacher that Comac has ever had, which is a really cute line. He agrees to take him on as his apprentice.
And that they will continue the assignment out on the Outer Rim.
Yep, at the Starlight Beacon.
So that, they head out to the Starlight Beacon for the dedication. So once again, we see this book largely ending at the Starlight Beacon. Yep,
Vernestra's there. Avar Kriss is there.
Yeah, and then to wrap up our vessel crew, Affie is
Affie
unhappy.
Found the proof that she needed.
Yes, so turns out the guild was doing bad things to their indentured pilots.
One, they had indentured pilots. Two, they were basically holding over their indentured status as a way to get them to do extra, more dangerous jobs.
And that's how her parents died.
And that's how her parents died, because they were trying to take on these extra, more dangerous jobs so that they could end their sentence sooner, so that they could have a life with their daughter. And in the process of doing that, they died.
So Affie, after scouring the station for all of that code that was written, she takes it, she decides that Scover doesn't really care.
Nope.
And is going to keep doing this no matter what. So she just goes to the authorities, because the authority in Coruscant is much stronger on the rules for how you can treat indentured servants. And she gets the guild dissolved, which means all of the ships within it.
Legalese around that is when like a guild or corporation like this gets dissolved for these reasons, anyone who the like highest ranking officer on a ship becomes the owner of that ship. So the vessel crew belongs to to Leox, right?
It would be Leox is the captain of the vessel, and he loves this ship, loves it. But when they're getting checked out by the Republic, when it asks, who's the ranking member, he says that it is Affie, it's her ship, and she's like, no, you're the captain. And he's like, yeah, but you're the highest ranking of the by
guild,
because you were like the leader's second in like the next to rise, so that would make you the highest in command, because he knows that she loves the vessel as well and will treat it kindly,
and he knows that she'll keep him on as captain, and it will basically be a joint
it'll still be all three of them together.
Well, almost not.
Geode was never gonna leave them.
I know. So,
Orla wanted it.
So we also find that Orla is continuing to be a wayseeker, and is kind of buying her own ship to go chart her own path into the Outer Rim, and she brought Geode with her to kind of help her pick out a good ship. And once Geode is like, yeah, this is a good one, this will get you where you're going, she's like, do you want to like maybe come with me and be my navigator? And he's like,
no.
But
no, Geode sticks with the vessel crew.
And that's the end. Everything wraps up very well.
I'm sure there's a lot more details and things that we missed. It's a fairly long book. Favorite character? in this book?
Oh, do I have to guess yours? I mean, you already told me yours.
What is your favorite character in
This
this
is my favorite character. I think all of the Jedi were really great. I think probably Comac and Orla are my favorites. Leox is great. I love his, like, kind of, like, hippie stoner attitude towards everything that happens.
It looks like he wants a group hug.
Does he want a group hug? Comac's rad. He's dealing with a lot in this book. But he has very kind of like Qui-Gon Jinn vibes, which I like. Orla's also really cool. Just the idea of these way seekers, super cool. Again, I just like it in really awesome Jedi lore. And Claudia Gray is awesome about that. Please keep doing cool Jedi stuff. Your favorite was Geode.
Yes, my favorite was Geode. He's so good. We don't know. They are so good. Is it fully sentient? I don't know. But I just love I love all the interactions with Geode, and like he's a good shoulder to cry on.
I love when Wreath, like, they get introduced to Geode and Wreath's like, all right, that's a rock. Okay, I guess it's their lucky rock or whatever. And then he goes to the cafeteria like 2 minutes later and Geode's there and he's like, what?
He's like, huh, rock. Yeah, but I enjoy everyone's interactions with it. And like the Jedi, I'm sure faster than the average person who's meeting Geode starts to get the emotions that come from this thing that looks like a rock. And so I just really like Geode and the relationships that blossom around it. As far as the Jedi, if I had to pick a favorite Jedi, probably Wreath. I guess I like Padawans more than I like Jedi, like full Jedi.
That does seem to be the trend, right?
I like Buryaga, and I like Wreath. I just think Wreath's a man after my own heart, loving those archives and researching. And also just he loves to explain the things he knows and has learned, and
we're doing that right now.
Oh my goodness, that's all I do in all of my life. So I really like Wreath as well, and kind of his progress through this as well, is realizing that he's not alone, that there's others there for him, and that, teamwork can make the dream work, as they say. Whoopsie, Wikipedia!
Whoops.
Okay.
You know what that means, folks.
It means I hit random page on Wikipedia and see what comes up.
What do we have today?
We have the CR-90 Corvette.
Well, that sounds like a spaceship.
It is. They're also known as Corellian Corvettes or blockade runners.
Oh, okay. So we see this in the films.
Yes, we do.
This is Leia's ship in episode 4.
They were consular vessels manufactured by the Corellian Engineering Corporation. While the CR-90 would see initial use within the late Galactic Republic and Imperial Senate, many vessels would be appropriated by the early Rebellion and Rebel Alliance against the First Galactic Empire. Despite not being designed as a combat-oriented vessel, they were used by the navies of both the New Republic and the Resistance later on.
I feel like that applies to almost every single Rebel ship, right?
Oh, yeah, because it's just a hodgepodge of whatever they can get. So, yeah, we see these ships.
We see it in Rogue One. We see it in... they're in Squadrons, if you play Star Wars Squadrons. Yo, if you play Star Wars Squadrons, hit us up. I play Star Wars Squadrons, and I would love to play games with people that are friends of the show, like the show, care about the show, care about Star Wars. We list our email later in the episode. Shoot me an email and we'll get some games in.
Would y'all want to see us play these games on Twitch? Let us know. Next
time, we'll be covering some of the comic books. The first issues are out, and also Starlight Part 2.
Yeah, so we're staying with the High Republic for now. Yeah. Soon we will get into a 200-year jump, basically.
Yeah. When we get into the pre-episode 1 stuff.
Awesome.
Excellent. So big thank you to Claudia Gray for writing this fantastic novel, and thank you to Dan Bittner for reading it to me.
Thank you to the Thundering Asteroids as well for the song Frack Off, which we use as the intro and outro for our episode. You can find us wherever you get podcasts. Would love it if you could leave a review on iTunes. I don't know if you can leave reviews on other podcast media forms, but if you can...
tell us by doing it.
If you can't, tweet at us
at holochroncast.
and let us know that you enjoy the podcast.
You can find us on Facebook and YouTube, the holochronologist. And drop us an email. Say hello. Introduce yourself. Tell us if you read Into the Dark and who your favorite characters were. And you can reach us at holochronologist@gmail.com.
You're not the Troy